As we move into 2022, Valorant as a game is solidifying itself as a top title in FPS. We're getting more maps, more patches to fix bugs and problems in the game, we're getting great skins and awesome content. Yoru's rework is on the horizon as we finally have news on the incoming changes and everything seems great. But could we be missing something? Yoru definitely needs some changes, but there could be 3 more agents that need some reworks, as well as some other agents that we haven't really talked about. What is going on, ProGuides family? It is your host Sergeant Frost, and today we're going to be discussing 4 agents that we think definitely need some reworks heading into 2022. We want to preface this video today by saying that these 4 agents we discussed today are just our opinions on what we think these agents are currently struggling with, and what we think they need in order to become more viable. In truth, one of the biggest culprits for why these agents are so unpicked currently is due to 2 agents stealing the show, Astra and Jet. Both of these agents are super useful in their own right, and that's part of the reason why these agents seem to be in such a situation where they aren't viable. So it could either be nerfing Astra and Jet, or buffing these 4 agents, or a bit of both to meet halfway. But speaking of Astra stealing the show, we've got a huge announcement featuring one of the best Astra players in the world, Sentinel Zombs.
I'm Zombs, I'm a top pro for Valorant, and welcome to my brand new Valorant class. This class will go over everything you need to climb the Valorant ranked ladder. How to move, shoot, and think just like me. Whether you're silver, diamond, a brand new player, or a veteran of the community, you're gonna be the one carrying all your friends. I finally wanted to take the opportunity with this bootcamp to help you guys out and answer all your questions. So if you're serious about becoming a better Valorant player, join me for the next 14 days and commit to improving.
Now you can truly be a part of Zombs Nation. And while we're waiting for agent reworks heading into 2022, you can start off the new year with lessons from the best the world has to offer. Spots are limited, so make sure to reserve your spot for Zombs' bootcamp today. So let's start off this list with the only agent that is confirmed to be getting a rework that is currently in development. Earlier this year, Riot attempted to rework both Viper and Yoru in the same update. While Viper immediately shot up the list in viability, Riot kind of did a half-hearted rework on Yoru and only changed around some of the numbers in his abilities and called it a day. Unfortunately, Yoru seemed to have much more fundamental problems in his kit than just a numbers tweak in order to make him a viable agent. He is an agent that relies on outplays and mentally tricking your opponents. And honestly, you can't rely on smoke and mirrors to get consistent kills in Valorant, so that agent design portion of him is a little hard to make balanced. His kit in general tailors more to him being a flank or a lurk agent, which is not ideal because as a duelist, he needs his abilities to break through the defenses of a bomb site and entry in. So in hindsight, Yoru's kit was kind of counterintuitive to what a duelist is supposed to be and what he's supposed to do for his team. So he has some identity flaws in his agent design that need to be ironed out in a rework. So shortly after seeing that Yoru's first rework wasn't helpful, Riot said they would be giving him a proper complete rework. The good news is we recently got a news update on his rework with some info changes to his decoy and gate crash. And we can expect something more from his ultimate coming in as well. So what do we know about his rework so far? Well, the devs have told us that they are only comfortable sharing 2 of his abilities so far, his gate crash and his fake out. First, let's bring up his fake out because this is the biggest change so far. Fake out used to be his fake footsteps ability that sounded close to what normal footsteps would sound like. Now it's been replaced with a new visual, which is a carbon copy of Yoru that runs forward and upon getting shot will wind up and explode, which debuffs enemies around it. This is a solid change to Yoru's kit, as his footsteps just didn't have the illusion power to trick enemies consistently if they faced Yoru before. This new clone should trick a lot more trigger-happy players who don't have the discipline or aren't expecting a fake to swing. And I also like that his clone explodes and debuffs enemies too. This clone can be a nice entry tool like a raised boombot to distract enemies and potentially deal some damage if the debuff lands on enemies. The second ability that they've shared with us are some nice changes to his gate crash ability. The devs have lowered the range at which enemies can see and hear the tether on the map to keep the element of surprise on Yoru's side. They've also increased its travel speed by 20%, and you can now fake activate the teleport, which could become a solid mind game, especially since the teleport was originally so loud. So far, this rework looks like it's actually trying to address some of the problems with his kit by changing and replacing some of his old abilities with meaningful ones that can actually help him perform his job as a duelist much better. We have to wait a little bit longer to see what happens to his flashes and his ultimate, but after seeing the progress so far, I know Yoru is in good hands going into 2022. As we stated in the disclaimer, we would talk about certain agents that needed reworks not because their kits were useless, but more due to the fact that other agents replaced their use because they had better tools. A great example of this situation happening is the current issue with Omen and Brimstone being pushed out of the meta by Astra's dominance. So let's take a deeper look at why Omen lost his job as a smoker in Valorant. And before you guys come at me saying, well, Bone Cold was owning with Omen in the Valorant Champions Finals. Yes he was. But unfortunately, most of the pro scene doesn't field Omen at all, and Ascend is one of the few teams that still have a place for him. So what happened to Omen? First off, when Viper received a nice rework earlier this year, this was strike one against Omen because Viper proved that on certain maps, a vision blocking wall was much better than two well-placed smokes. The eventual addition of maps like Icebox, Breeze, and Fracture proved Viper's point even further, because she was simply just a better controller because her wall covered a lot more ground than Omen's smokes could. Outside of Viper, a little while after her rework, Astra was introduced, and this just added even more complexity to the controller role with how powerful Astra's kit was at launch. To say that her kit was overloaded was an understatement on her release. She had access to 5 hollow smokes that she could accurately place down anywhere on the map. She could recall her stars and fake smokes consistently with a low cooldown, and we haven't even mentioned yet that she is arguably some of the best CC for a controller with both a readily available suck and stun. Oh yeah, don't forget about her massive sound blocking wall she has in her kit as well. You see where I'm going with this? 2 agents were introduced into the meta that pretty much pushed out room for any other controllers. On top of that, Omen received some nerfs as well to his smoke travel speed, his blind cost, and to the price of his shadow step, and you eventually needed to buy his second smoke as well. What we're trying to say is, Omen's kit isn't inherently flawed design-wise. Omen needs a rework more so because he's behind the curve and his abilities aren't as useful pound for pound against agents like Astra or Viper. Even Brimstone has post-plant presence because of his molly lineups and his ultimate that made him have a higher pick rate in champions. But then again, 4% isn't much higher than 2%. So what needs to change with Omen's kit? Well, first off, as a suggestion, if Riot is unwilling to give Omen completely new abilities within a rework, his regular abilities at least need to change back to what they used to be. First off, Omen might function better with more smokes at the start, so that way he can facilitate more map control without feeling useless mid-round. Another thing that could use some changes is his blind, which is strong, but it's also very easy to hurt his teammates with at the same time. One change could be to let his paranoia not affect his teammates, which could give Omen more options or perhaps affect his teammates less. For his ultimate, we really liked the proposed leak change which allowed him to blind all enemies around him when he got to his target teleport location, but it could be too drastic of a change for Riot since it could make him really powerful on offense. But perhaps lowering his ult point cost down to 6 could give him more of a chance to use it in game. One ability that I think will definitely need a rework, however, is Omen's Shadow Step. Although it's very useful for pre-round repositioning and in some cases to teleport out of situations, the ability as a whole isn't too useful in practice, and realistically feels kinda gimmicky. In general, Omen's usefulness needs to be buffed a little bit to make him more flexible as a smoker and more powerful at a baseline. Before we move on, let's get to our question of the day. Today's question is, what agent do you personally think needs a rework or extensive changes to more than one ability in their kits? Personally, I would like to see Cypher get some touch-ups to his abilities, because right now he's definitely in last place compared to his counterparts in the Sentinel class. Let us know what your answer is in the comment section down below. As we mentioned before, Brimstone kind of falls into this same unfortunate situation as Omen. Brimstone is another victim of power creep in the controller class. After Viper's rework and the introduction of Astra, Brimstone's value in the meta plummeted. His main weaknesses are tied to his smoking capabilities first and foremost. Unlike the other standard smokers Astra and Omen, Brimstone only has access to 3 smokes in a round, despite having the best smokes quality-wise. Another issue with Brim's smokes is that he has surprisingly limited range compared to his peers. Simply put, Brimstone's smokes are very restrictive and not very adaptable to different situations. In games where defaults are drawn out, Brimstone has troubles assisting his team until the big take happens, which makes it hard to support his team throughout the round. Outside of his smokes, his molly and ultimate are not problematic or what makes him weak. His stim beacon, however, isn't the best fit for his kit. While it's nice to have a stim buff that's easily deployable to help out your team, Brim's kit is lackluster already to begin with, so it wouldn't hurt if a rework replaced his stim beacon with another ability that could be more useful, or even just practical to help him be a better controller. Brimstone definitely has some issues with 2 of the abilities in his kit, and a minor rework to both his smokes and his stim beacon could easily propel him back into the meta. He's already a great agent in the post plant because of his molly lineups and his ultimate's presence, so he at least has some niches that actually make him outperform Omen in practice. And for the last agent that we think needs a rework, we have none other than Phoenix. Phoenix is an agent that I did not foresee ending up on this list last year, but 2021 proved that something about him needs some touching up. The abilities in his kit aren't completely bad, and he isn't clearly worse than the other agents. Phoenix's main problem lies in the fact that his kit does a lot, but he doesn't specialize in one thing too well. It's kind of like that saying, jack of all trades but master of none. That's exactly what playing Phoenix feels like in game. For instance, he has short-range, non-adaptable flashes. He has a molly that is arguably the weakest out of all the mollies in the game, and it has a limited travel distance range on top of that. His wall isn't great for vision blocking and is more just used as a healing tool for himself, and the only ability that really makes Phoenix stand out is his ultimate. Don't get me wrong, Run It Back is one of the best duelist abilities in the game. In fact, it's literally perfect for entry fragging as a duelist. But since it's an ultimate ability, you won't have access to it every round, so you can't rely on it to win you consistent rounds in a row. Phoenix's kit shows its age because the devs created this kit way before the game was released and before any of the other age imbalance changes began. What we are trying to say is that Phoenix is a victim of power creep. He was a great agent when there were only 10 agents in the game and he didn't have a lot of competition. But as newer agents started being added and other agents around him got buffed, Phoenix has been left in the dust because his kit can't keep up with the power levels of similar agents within the class. If we had to sum up Phoenix's problems up into one statement, it would go like this. Phoenix has a good set of abilities for a bunch of different purposes, but in practice, he does none of them particularly well, which makes him not worth picking over other agents since whatever you really need him for, someone else can do better. So what would we do to fix Phoenix's kit in a rework? Well, this one is definitely tough since we would need numbers to evaluate which abilities need to be changed or replaced the most for Phoenix. His flashes are fine as is. Maybe an increase on the flash duration could make them a little bit scarier to deal with. His molly needs to either be buffed to do more and travel farther or else just remove it, because in its current state, most Phoenix mains keep it as access healing for later in the round, which is not what its main use was intended to be. In our opinion, it would be hard to buff his wall to a point where it's useful as it's pretty much static as is. So in this case, remove it and replace it with something else. And his ultimate is arguably the best ability and it's fine as is. Simply put, Phoenix does have problems as he has almost completely disappeared from the meta over the course of 2021. But unfortunately, it's hard to pinpoint exactly what needs to be changed or replaced on him to bring him back into the meta. You don't want to buff him to being too OP because then he will become an uncontrollable menace that can heal himself. But you also don't want him to be useless and get less play than Yoru either. Phoenix is a tough case to crack, but we hope the devs will look into what will make him stronger going into 2022. And that wraps it up for our 4 agents that we think need reworks. If you enjoyed, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. And also don't forget to sign up for the Zombs Bootcamp. With that being said, it's been Sergeant Frost and good luck on the grind.